Hello, welcome back to the show, World War II Books Where to Start. I'm your host, Ernest Hemingway, here to talk today about celebrity authors and their impact on World War II historical writing in the modern age. And I'm not too fond of it. Celebrity authors have kind of become a spotlight thing the last 10 years. The most egregious one I've seen is James Patterson hooking up with Bill Clinton to write a murder mystery. That really jumps the shark for me. Of course, we had Newt Gingrich pump out a bunch of history stuff, and the mighty Bill O'Reilly has been making himself a post-Fox News empire with his killing blah 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 X dude or killing X organization series. So I started off with a variant of that called Hitler's Last Days from 2015. It says it clocks in at 320 pages, and now I've listened to the audio. It was rated unabridged at 4 hours. So I don't know how 320 pages translates to 4 hours. I don't think so, unless it's like a large print with lots and lots of pictures. I don't know. I did not track down a physical copy to find out. I found that a bit suspicious. This is really, and it's also rated as kind of aimed at young adults. So in that sense, it's not meant as a serious statement on history anyway. But even so, what we really get is George Patton. That's right. Hitler's Last Days does not connect to George Patton unless you're writing a book and your name is Bill O'Reilly. This is 40% Patton, 30% Battle of the Bulge, Crossing the Rhine. I'd say 20% blah, 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 with Skorzeny featuring in there, and 10% Hitler. I mean, really, it's 10% Hitler. There's no value to this at all. Even if you're, say, a teenager picking this up, you're not going to get anything out of this because it's not focused on what the title says it's focused on. You'll be very confused about what the hell is George Patton doing. And taking a leak in the Rhine got to do with Hitler blowing his brains out in the bunker. You're going to be very lost, and you should be. The only thing I picked out of here, the only nugget I picked out of here at all, was that supposedly their favorite song, Hitler and Eva Braun's, was supposedly a tune named Blood Red Roses. Now, I looked this up. It's an old shanty, pirate shanty thing. If it's the same title, I don't know. And I listened to a couple of versions of it. It's definitely got that limerick, with AB rhyming thing. I don't know. I don't see Hitler dancing with Eva Braun in their apartment. I can't picture that. And to say this is their favorite tune, I don't recall seeing that anywhere else. And honestly, I didn't go through my Hitler bios to find out. I don't think it's worth my time. But that's the nugget I picked up out of here. You can confirm or deny it for me. I'd love to know. But that is absolutely worthless for my first entry. I would give this 0 stars because it's really about Patton and not the title of the book. Hitler's Last Days, supposedly. All right, then next up is Ghosts of Honolulu by Mark Harmon and Leon Carroll Jr. from 2023, clocking in about 250 pages. Curiously, without any index, bibliography, or notes. So that's a huge strike against it right there. The co-author here, Leon Carroll Jr., is a retired NCIS investigator, officer, whatever. So obviously hooking up with Mark Harmon is no big stretch of the imagination, especially since Leon Carroll worked on the NCIS show. So it's a natural fit there to have them put out a book together. And this is going to cover the first American intelligence officer of Japanese descent ever in the history of the United States. This is well before NCIS was formed. It was formed in the 90s, but this is the antecedents of the NCIS. He was working for American Naval Intelligence in Honolulu. Okay, so one other thing real quick about the book itself. There's a few photos scattered throughout the book, and there's a little bit of a photo dump at the very tail end of the book, but there's not a single picture of Douglas Wada, who is our hero, our focus, that first agent. There's not a single photo of him. I had to go to the internet to find one. How in the world do you not get that right? This is your dude that you're writing about for 250 pages. His photo ought to be in here. Wrong. Just wrong. Okay, so and so they're also focusing on, I guess, his nemesis, Takeo Yoshikawa, the spy that was inserted into the Japanese consulate in Hawaii to take pictures of the Pearl Harbor installations and get a map, the famous bomb plot, mapping out where the ships were docked and moored so they could put a bombing grid for the Japanese attack on December 7th. But the two don't really coincide. There's a bit of a spy hunting thing involved in there, sort of, kind of, but not really. They catch on to Yoshikawa after the fact, after he's been removed to an internment camp in, I think it was Arizona or New Mexico. He's eventually shipped back as part of a prisoner exchange, and he goes into hiding after the war, figuring that the Americans will be able to find him. Douglas Wada is sent to Japan as part of the American contingent for the Japanese war crimes trials, and they do make a tiny effort to go find him, but because he wasn't used his real name in Hawaii, they find they've got nothing to go on, and the investigation dies right there. Seems like there was just no real effort made, to go after this guy, or they didn't have the investigative chops to figure it out. This is really curious, kind of lack of drive. I don't get it. You think you'd want the guy who laid out the plan for the Imperial Japanese Navy. You think you'd want to hang him high. They never got him. And eventually he was, I think, extended an amnesty, came out of hiding and told his story. He wrote his own book in the 60s, which is still in print on Amazon. I looked at it. It's just too high price for what it is, so I haven't gone after it. So that's that story. And that should be one of the features of the book. But this wiffle waffles around a lot with Japanese population on Hawaii and the culture, and getting into the naval intelligence game, as well as Wada's trip to Japan in the 20s. It wiffle waffles around a lot with a lot of inconsequential fluff. So it's not too convincing in that respect. He did interview, because of his Japanese language skills, the commander that midget sub that beached on the Hawaiian shores there. War prisoner number 1, he got to interview him and translate his answers, and that should have been a feature of the book. That should have been a knuckle-biting, dramatic moment of the writing of this book, and it's passed off in about 2 paragraphs and forgotten about. Again, you're missing the ball. Swing and miss. Strike 1, strike 2. What are you doing here? I don't get it. And so we wander on and on and on to the end of the war, and then Wada's post-war stuff. He was a Cold Warrior. He kind of moved up the ranks to commander or captain, I think, in the post-war intelligence service, and was kind of a big player. He had a long career, 30 years or so, with American intelligence. That could have been meat for the grill, grist for the mill. That could have been very intriguing, but it's mentioned as a bare bones afterthought. So there's a lot of missed opportunities and a lack of focus that's just startling here. Writing overall is bland, but endurable. And for something that could have been far more interesting, they just missed the boat on it entirely. So I give this 1 star. It's got no real heft to it at all. That is Ghost of Honolulu by Mark Harmon and Leon Carroll Jr. And then on to the doozy of the bunch, which I have avoided for years. Churchill, Hitler, and the Unnecessary War by Patrick J. Buchanan. He's born in 1933. I believe he's still with us. I couldn't find death notice for him. Still hanging around. He's an American pundit. He was a Reagan advisor. I think he associated himself with the neocon movement. I'm not quite sure. I don't quite remember. He ran for president 3 times and got nowhere. That's another story. So I've avoided this because I'd always imagined this was going to be a veiled anti-Semitic attack on Churchill, but it's not. Given Buchanan's political proclivities, I had really imagined this was going to be a rant along those lines. It's not. It is a rant, but it's a very confused one and a very long one. So I don't know if you're aware of this. I certainly wasn't until I read this book. That every foreign policy decision the British made after, say, 1909, which I think was the year of the Fashoda incident, could be wrong, somewhere around there, but every decision they made in foreign policy after that was wrong. W-O-R-O-N-G, wrong. And it wasn't just a mistake. They were all blunders. One of a historian's favorite words for when something really goes kaflooey. Every decision the British made was a nail in the coffin of their empire. And their empire is the most important Christian institution on the face of the earth. It should have been preserved. But no, they threw it away. So there's a very strong whiff of the Christian evangelical stuff coming up here, hellfire and Satan's laughter and all that, because the British Empire was thrown away in such a cavalier and uncomprehendingly stupid manner. But he doesn't push the religion. He just throws it up at you like, here's the backbone, here's the real reason. And it kind of implies that the white man is here to save the world. Not stated as, it's stated kind of in the foreword, like, it's okay to have a white man dominated world. It's okay. And the British throwing that away was bad, and we can't get it back. And that's bad. It's kind of implied there. And then he leaves it alone. So make that of what you will. That's what I got out of it. The problem is, it's really not Churchill and Hitler. It's really the British, every British PM and foreign secretary, and sometimes the ambassadors. They're all the blunderers. It's not just Churchy, although he comes in for his fair share of denigration, more than his fair share. But we get Asquith, and we get Chamberlain, of course, and Lloyd George, and Edward Grey, and all the big names, Halifax included in there. They're all the blunderers that make the war happen, and they're unnecessary. And somehow, Winnie is also to blame for the start of World War I. And I really got lost there on his threads of reasoning for that. But he threw that in there. It's all Winnie's fault for being a warmonger and being in the being the First Lord of the Navy, that the First Sea Lord, whatever he was. It's all his fault, all and all over again. So of course we will get the Dardanelles and we will get Antwerp as examples of it being his fault. But as far as the start of the war, how Britain and Germany stumbled into the guns of August, if you will. Thank you, Barbara Tuchman. I don't know. It just happened, and somehow Winnie was pulling the levers, and we got no clear direction when it comes to the start of the war with Poland at 39. He blames Winnie in a substitution for the guarantee by Britain to Poland that they will go to war to help them should they be invaded. It's Chamberlain's doing. That's his policy. He extends the war guarantee, not Winnie. But in a sleight of hand 3-card Monty, where's the lady? He subs in Winnie in subsequent sentences to make you know it really was Winnie's fault for doing that. Okay, wrong. But he's got to have his villain, and the villain's on the cover, and the villain is not Chamberlain. Although Chamberlain is, character assassination there too. But it's just a mishmash of subbing in names here and there and plastering Churchill all over it. Churchill's fault all the time. It's just a mess. Now it was kind of interesting that stuff I didn't know. Chamberlain extended war guarantees to other countries after Poland, and was obviously gross overreach. But he was, and I don't think I've ever seen that covered in other books about the start of the war. That Churchill was guaranteeing Britain would go to war to help X, Y, and Z also if Germany invaded them. Now, I don't know what the point was, whether it was trying to alliance making, mutual defense pacts. I don't quite know. Or as Buchanan says, it's a blank check to go to war. He says the Polish government were unscrupulous adventurers and fully willing to risk war if they knew Britain was going to help them. They had nothing to lose from refraining from war, and that the idea of negotiating with Hitler over Danzig went out the window with Chamberlain's guarantee. Well, I think it's incredibly naive to think that if the Poles had been strong-armed in negotiating with Hitler, courtesy of Britain and France, that any deal they negotiated over Danzig would have lasted more than 6 weeks anyway. I'm sure Buchanan knows that they broke every agreement they ever made. Every diplomatic agreement they ever made, they broke. So why would they hold to Poland? I don't know. Buchanan doesn't mention that. It's off the table for him. And The French get a free pass here, as they often do. All the French realistically had to do, in a whole book of what ifs, alternate reality history here, this is the most solid supposition from my point of view. All France had to do was take control of the Rhineland again, and the war would have stopped. Hitler might have been deposed. The general would have finally had a valid cause, and with some rallying the people. That would have rattled the German people like nothing else. Sure, we can attack Poland. We're not wild about it, but it's an easy win. But if France takes back the Rhineland, which we've just held for 3 years, after being occupied for about 20, that would shake Germany to its foundations. But the French would not move. They made a little token advance across the border, had a couple skirmishes in small towns, and went home. And that was it, knowing very well Britain had no ground troops to contribute. They weren't going to risk their navy going into the Baltic for any reason. They didn't have the courage. So it's a dead letter, right? That's a dead letter of, we made it this time. But you do get stuck in the war. Now, is it an unnecessary war? That's Buchanan's contentions. Unnecessary. Unnecessary. If they had just let Hitler have his way, he'd already made all his land grab takebacks from Versailles. And if you read Mein Kampf, he says, and I don't think many of the British leaders had. I really don't. I don't think many British journalists had. If you read Mein Kampf, you understood he was going for the Soviet Union. Okay, well, great. So Buchanan is saying on the altar, sacrifice on the altar of self-interest, let everybody in Eastern Europe burn and go to hell. It's not in our interest to save any lives there or attempt to or make any noble gestures to support them. That would be really cold-blooded, Bismarckian foreign policy. That's not how the Western Allies did things. It's just not. That wasn't in their calculations. He even makes the point that the British were into a balance of power politics, and they're quite willing to cut side deals if it gave them an advantage, i.e., the London German naval agreement of 35. Quite willing to cut side deals that would imperil other nations if it gave them a temporary advantage anywhere to balance of power on the continent. They did it. They would do it in a heartbeat, without a second thought or a by your leave. Just a sorry old boy. It didn't mean that later on. That's how they operated. That was in their interest. So if they cut a deal to guarantee coming on the side of Poland in 39, it was in regard to balance of power. And we can't let Hitler take any more. He's gotten everything he can take. He made us look like idiots over Sudetenland and then taking Prague in 39. And we can't be made to look like idiots anymore. He's crossed the line. We've got to act. So that from that point, unnecessary. No, it's policy. This is how we feel we have to react. We can't let him have any more. So I don't think it's valid. Buchanan's effort here to justify this as unnecessary is just invalid. He's also got a lot of crocodile tears for the dead of World War I, all the millions of them. A lot of crocodile tears shed over the unnecessary Great War, and especially the tears for the Versailles Treaty and how unfair it was to treat Germany like that and starve their children. And of course, Winston's responsible for that too. He instituted the hunger blockade, as he calls it. Again, do we extend warfare to civilians and children? Yes, we do. Surrender or you die. That's war. But he's going to put that on Winnie's tombstone as another war crime too. Why not? Just chalk it up. There's a lot of what ifs here. This whole book is really built on what ifs. A lot of counterfactual history. If they had just done this, this would have been better. If they had just done that, this would have been better. I can't believe they did this. This is incredibly stupid. The whole world would have been better. The final chapters you get back to his political pundit days and pointing out the demise of the British Empire, what it meant for U.S.-American foreign policy in the post-war era when we took up the mantle of policemen of the world in lieu of the British Empire, which was disintegrating, and all our troubles with Mao Zedong and Pol Pot, all the millions of people dead, murdered by the regimes. It's all Britain's fault still for blowing up their empire with World War II. Dude, they're not responsible for everything, really not. He also throws in the caveat, or not the caveat, but the little stunning face slap that the British are responsible for Japanese invading Manchuria in 31 and then the full Chinese War in 37. They're responsible for it because they broke the Treaty with Japan in post-World War I. if the Brits had just kept their alliance with Japan, Japan would never turn into a military dictatorship and would never invaded China. Never. All they had to do was keep the alliance in the 1920s and not do the London Naval Agreement. All would have been hunky dory. Another blunder. That's just amazing. Like the Japanese didn't have a mind of their own, and their politics would have stopped dead in their tracks because they kept the alliance. You got to remember that he gives like full credit here to Japan being a full-blood partner in World War One. They mattered for about 3.5 seconds in World War One, taking some German possessions in the Pacific and sailing their fleet around, trying to find the shore north and nice now, but not making much of an effort of it. That was her contribution. Done. So how do you think they're going to be treated as an equal partner at the Versailles Treaty? I have no idea. But he seems to think that was, their deserving end. Well, maybe if they put 100,000 troops into Europe, it wouldn't have mattered. But they didn't, so they didn't. So it's an entirely deliberate misreading of history. And I wouldn't call this a history book. I would call this political science, and that would be kind, I think. It's almost alternative science fiction, what-if stuff. The final couple chapters are a non-stop litany of character assassination of Winston himself and every egregiously bad moment the man had in his entire lifetime. Again, you got to remember he's a Victorian gentleman from an insane amount of money, and he and Earthlings didn't exist on the same plane. He was up here, and everybody else was down here. That was his mindset. No matter his fine speechifying and his great diplomacy, he was up here, and everybody else was down here. That's how he conceived of the world. He was a British aristocracy, an arrogant bleep. That's what he was. And to expect him to be anything else to appeal to your idea of what sainthood should be is absolutely ludicrous. But that's what Buchanan does for 400 some pages or whatever I said it was, if I did. And at the end of it, you just got to shake your head, wash your hands, and walk away from it and clear your mind. So that's a negative 2 stars, negative 3 stars. And my soiree into celebrity authors has not gone well, as you can see. Now, a viewer did recommend a book by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and another writer about the, let me get this, I'm not sure if I can say this right, 761st Tank Destroyer Battalion or Tank Battalion at the Battle of the Bulge, an all-black unit, which I'm actually kind of looking forward to. Maybe I hope it's better. I think it would have to be better after this first serving of nonsense. I hope it will be better. But I'm going to try that another time, another day. Until then, man, I'm Ernie Hemingway, and that was brutal. I'm going to have to go to a cafe in Paris somewhere and drink this one off. Until next time, happy reading.